listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses in the episode for Friday, March 11th, 2022.
It's a big week. It's a big week.
It's been a bat week.
No, big week.
No?
No. There's exciting new stuff. Exciting
what?
new
What?
stuff. Right?
Tell me, what's bigger than the Batman, Andrew?
The trailer for both Star Trek Strange New Worlds and Obi-Wan Kenobi, the TV show. Yeah, huge. Both releasing in May.
You made it very clear these are bigger than the Batman in Andrew's world.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
I mean, I could see Obi-Wan Kenobi being a tale of vengeance and justice. Maybe.
Whatever. It's like, it's not like we haven't had a Batman movie.
That's true.
There's actually something weird when I realize that in our lifetime, there have been like 12 Batman movies or something.
Yeah, how many Spider-Mens?
4, 3, so only, I guess, 8 Batman movies. And then like 8 Spider-Man movies.
Honestly, the prequels are basically Obi-Wan Kenobi movies.
Well, yeah, they cast the same guy.
Right. So look, since these are so important to you, tell us about your immediate reactions to the trailer for Obi-Wan Kenobi and what was it, Star Trek?
Strange New Worlds.
Oh, that's the Captain Pike show.
Yeah. Anson
Oh,
Mount
that's
as
exciting.
Captain Pike.
Okay, never mind. I take that back. This sounds great.
Well, and it was just a teaser trailer, and I think really for both. I mean, the big thing is, and I think what for Strange New Worlds, it was, there's not a lot going on in the trailer other than it does, it feels like Strange New Worlds, something that the Star Trek series haven't done quite that. There's been a heavier focus on narrative and serialization, especially with later Discovery and Picard. So the idea that we have Strange New Worlds that's gonna I think the promises are it's gonna be a Planet of the Week kind of Strange New Worlds, right?
That sounds awesome.
Which is that's kind of what's exciting, and so that's cool. And then of course with Obi-Wan Kenobi, who knows? I mean,
I haven't seen the teaser. Is it him just walking into a desert and going like, you know what? They should call me Old Ben.
I mean, I'm hoping they tell us how you go from Obi-Wan Kenobi to Old Ben Kenobi, thinking that's a good alias that won't tip him off.
That's just a game of telephone. That's what that is.
Maybe it's just like, oh no, it's the Kenobis. There's like 100 Kenobis on Tatooine. The Obi-Wan was the thing that was the trailer mostly seems to focus on actually a lot of the Inquisitors, which are the bad guys.
Oh, I think they were in the video game I played.
They were also originally featured in Star Wars Rebels. And in fact, I believe the lead Inquisitor, voiced by Jason Isaacs in Rebels, is actually now played by a person that is not Jason Isaacs.
Well, that's too bad, perhaps.
I mean, it's like, that's always that weird thing of when you do a voice actor to live action, right?
Right. Is, Starbuck, is that the only person that's made the transition from voiceover to live action?
Well,
she played a Mandalorian.
You're right. She plays Bo-Katan. There's been I believe although in the opposite direction, Forrest Whitaker.
Yes, indeed.
Although he played a character live that was a different voice actor, but then when he came back and did the voice for the character, and I think there's been a few others that have.
Right.
Maybe, but nothing like substantive, nothing like that I can think of off the top of there's a minor spoiler for the end of Boba Fett, but Cad Bane, it's the same. It's weird because it's the voice actor's the same.
Okay.
The voice actor's the same. I'll say that. That's about as much as I can say, right?
Not to switch franchises real quick, but when does Strange New Worlds debut?
I believe they're both the first week of May.
Okay, you know what? There's a high probability that I will watch Strange New Worlds because before we segue into the main portion of the show, we were greeted with a horrible horrible sort of overlay this last weekend, Andrew. My wife and I sat down to watch yet another episode of The Next Generation, like we've been doing. We're nearing the end of season 4 as we speak. And when you press play, usually just like the little drop down that's overlaid onto the opening seconds of the show is like, hey, watch out, there's fear and sex in this episode or whatever, right? Instead of that, it actually overlaid the most offensive thing I could ever see, which is this is leaving Netflix on April 1st.
Oh.
So I might be signing up for Paramount Plus.
Just to get all that extra Star Trek.
You can't pull that IV out, Andrew. You need that sustenance. I need that sustenance. So,
well, and the nice thing is that, there's when you go to like the shows category on the navigation for Paramount Plus, there's just a category called Star Trek.
right. So
just leave it set to that.
That's a bummer, but I'll just have to, for me, it's a matter of like, okay, I have to cancel something. So it's a matter of choice at that point. Right now, it's honestly not looking good for Netflix right now, because that's the thing. There's actually websites dedicated to like, what should you cancel this month? And I'm like, this is a world I don't want to live in.
Right.
Aside from a variety of other qualifiers there, but we are living and we are here and we are doing nerdy and geeky things. So this week we are going to be focusing on our respective weeks in geek. So Andrew, if you don't mind starting, what is your week in geek this week? And is it either Fallout or Power Rangers?
No, but speaking of Paramount Plus.
There we go.
I was on the Paramount Plus actually recently. I just rewatched Star Trek Picard.
Oh, okay, it's Star
1.
Wars. It's Star Trek, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's not. I was mentioning I rewatched Star Trek Picard because I'm going to start watching season 2.
Season 2,
this week. And I want to just get a refresher. And while it was on there, Paramount Plus was like, "Oh hey, here's this new movie that came out that people are talking about." And it was
is that the tone you assign to Paramount Plus when you go through the menus? Oh hey.
So it splashes this big promotion for the 2022 movie Scream.
2022.
Yes, released in January of 2022 in theaters.
Okay.
And now on Paramount Plus, so it's a bit of a quick turnaround. But honestly,
well done. Hey,
they must have realized like
that's the world we live in.
I mean, I had actually to check. It's something like a $25 million budget film. Like burning it to Paramount Plus quick after you make your 100-some million. You're like, all right, we're good.
Well, I mean, not for nothing. That seems to be a metric for like derision, but like honestly, the faster they get stuff to streaming, the better in this current climate. But I see what you're saying.
So I watched Scream. Now I had watched. So for context, Scream is a horror film franchise originally created by Wes Craven.
Like a meta horror film, really.
Right. It was. They were. The whole thing is, Wes Craven made. I think the first one was in like 97 or 98, and the whole kind of shtick was that there was that meta. It was about people that were really into horror films, then being kind of in their own horror film.
right.
And the idea being that there's kind of meta discussion about what it means to be in a horror film by the cast, the characters.
Like, they definitely made commentary on like. Biases and tropes and even racial condemnations.
like we just and kind of some weird stuff that we have a lot more like meta humor and meta narratives now. But for me, I think I always consider one of the earlier like just straight up meta narrative kind of things I remember seeing. Except it's a horror film, right? Where they'd say like, oh, if you say I'll be right back, you're not going to be right back. You're going to get killed, And then they spawned 2 immediate sequels, Scream 2 and Scream 3, which basically then turned into commentaries about horror film franchises and sequels and stuff like that, to a certain level of absurdity, but that was the franchise. And so Scream 3 was probably late 90s, early 2000s. And I saw it, and that was the last I saw of the series. And then, of course, Paramount's like, hey, do you want to watch this? And I was like, oh, they made another movie. So I started watching it. because I remember, it was interesting. I watch horror films sometimes, and I like meta commentary. Of course, the most immediate meta commentary I got was about 10 minutes in when they mentioned, well, the last time these murders happened was 2011. I'm like, well, I guess I missed a movie, didn't I? Yeah, there was a Scream 4 I never knew about. But what was interesting about this is that, this is 2022, right? So this was filmed in 2020 to 2021. In this movie, other than being a sequel to the other, to the movie, it is a sequel, but it is, and this actually comes up in the movie. It's not a reboot, but it does feature a mostly new cast. But it does bring back legacy characters to kind of pass a torch. But it's also, it's not a direct sequel, but it's a reboot and a sequel. And in fact, in the movie, they use the term requel, or they use some other term. They say fans aren't, it's weird to watch a movie where it's talking about itself, so directly. Yeah, so it's a slasher film. I don't want to ruin the surprise for the 5 people that want to watch it. What I will say is it did what it says on the tin, right? It was a slasher film. It was a sequel to these other movies. It featured new characters. Obviously Wes Craven's been dead since I think 2015 or so. So he was not involved, but there's some other folks instead. But what I will say is something that's interesting is that the movie is a product of its time, and there's a few things about that I want to say. First of all, for those who don't remember, who haven't seen the original Scream, one of the big things was like the killer would call people and say, "Do you like scary movies?" And there were phones were a prominent feature, and I was wondering, well, how will that work? Because this is the era of cell phones, and in fact, they did. The movie opens with someone answering their landline, and it being kind of weird.
The call is coming from somewhere inside your network.
But there was also very quick commentary about cloning phones and stuff like that. So it still made sense, like the stupid trope. Because I remember Scream 2 even features a thing where someone calls the main character and says, "Do you like scary movies?" And she's got caller ID, and she's like, "No, Jimmy shit breath, I don't. Like, fuck you." So like. So they actually this was able to adapt and change in that regard, which was I think, it still kept the stupidness of like, we're gonna have a lot of phone call stuff, but in this different way. And it did feature cast members from the original kind of returning, and I think in a way that's slightly like a reference to Halloween, where like they come back and they're now like older.
Wizened,
a bit broken, but like there's a scene where they're like, we're just gonna confront this asshole and defeat him, which but the thing that for me, the part that I remember watching, and I actually texted you because I was like, holy shit, is they have there's a commentary about in about halfway through where in the movie universe of Scream, there is a movie series called Stab, which is basically about the murders, right? So the Scream 2 opens with the premiere of the movie Stab. So it becomes this weird, like, meta within meta, like, we're getting inceptioned into this movie universe. And so by this movie, the idea is, there have been actually 8 movies in the Stab trilogy. In the Stab series. And they have this whole commentary that the most recent one, Stab 8, ruined the franchise, and how it was done by that guy that did Knives Out, and how it tried to it disregarded the legacy of the series. Like suddenly the guy's got, and they even have a thing where they show like, he's got like a flamethrower, and how stupid this movie is. And it's like,
poor Rian Johnson.
And what's funny is that's my first thought was like, holy shit, are these people making fun of Rian Johnson? And actually, I read that he was supposed to have a cameo, but he couldn't because he was filming Knives Out 2. Because actually, this doesn't spoil anything, because it's like, it's still who ends up being the bad guys is a surprise. But the motivation is toxic fandom. Like that's
genius.
They are fans that are so obsessed about how the last person ruined the movie, they're going to go on a murder spree to create a new reboot for them to make a movie out of, right? And it's
That's pretty good.
It is like, and I was watching like, wow, you turned toxic fandom into exactly what it is, which is horrible people that do terrible things. It was just, it was weird.
It's a horror movie. Yeah.
It's a horror
Toxic
movie.
fandom is a horror movie.
And, but it's just funny because there's a line where they even refer to themselves. They have that conversation about toxic fandom. This is a line from the film. I texted it. That's to Dan, so I have to find it. Nobody takes true fans seriously. How can fandom be toxic? It's about love. And these are the people who literally just murdered multiple people.
Right? That's what an abusive partner says.
It's not a great movie, right? It's the fifth movie in a murder series, but I actually thought it was I enjoyed it, and I thought it was a really interesting way to have a commentary about fandoms. Especially, we open talking about Star Wars and Star Trek. Both of those have some fandom issues, although I think Star Wars more than Star Trek. But Star Trek still has it, all these fandoms have people who are like, right. You ruined my thing by making a person, right. Whatever. By putting
those people coming out saying those Star Trek movies are fucking not even Star Trek. They're the worst thing to happen to the franchise in years.
Nice try, Dan. You ruined my Star Trek by putting brown people in it. So I think it was just an interesting kind of take on it. I wonder. The thing is, it's the kind of movie though where I could see people watching it and shitty, terrible people watching it, not realizing that like, no, we're talking about you, right?
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And it was interesting because they also, another discussion they have is, one of the things is that in the first call, like, do you like scary movies? The girl's like, actually, yeah. I mean, my favorite is the Babadook.
That movie's great.
And so, and she this whole, they have another discussion about elevated horror, right? And they name drop Jordan Peele, right?
Yeah.
And one of the commentators like, oh no, that stuff ruins the genre. Again, by the bad guys.
Oh my God.
So it is. It is interesting just to watch this and see like, wow, I feel like you're potentially targeting some of the fans by saying like, you guys are you're bad. But
presented in such a way that they could be like, oh no, they're supporting us, right? Yeah, that's good stuff. I mean,
so it's it's still Scream. Still, I mean, the weirdest thing for me was when the movie starts, one of the actors, I see this guy, I'm like, God, why do I recognize that guy? And boy, does he sound familiar. It was Jack Quaid, who I don't recognize physically other than having seen him in the Star Trek after shows, who does the voice of Bradward Boimler in Star Trek Lower Decks.
Oh, okay.
So I was just like, why does this guy sound like someone I recognize? And I'm like,
actually, that just happened to me. And it's Star Trek related. We were watching an episode of Next Generation, not to hijack the conversation, an episode called The Drumhead. If you know, you know. But there's this visiting crazy admiral lady. I'm like, she sounds really familiar. I don't recognize her face, but she sounds really familiar. And she was a voice in one of the Studio Ghibli movies, Howl's Moving Castle. I'm like, oh, okay. I've watched that movie a lot, so that's awesome. So I watched the new Scream. I mean, the one thing is, I probably, in retrospect, maybe when I realized that there was a fourth movie, maybe I should have just watched that one first. But, it's fine. Full disclosure, Andrew texted this group chat that he's on with myself and friend of the show, on the ground DC correspondent Taylor. And he's like, oh shit, there's the new Scream movie. And I just learned there's previous movies and a TV show. Do I need to watch all those to understand the Scream movie? I'm like, dude, you are overthinking this whole franchise. Calm down.
I'm sure it's shallow enough to easily figure out through context clues. Is
that what I said?
That's what you said. And as it ends up, it worked out. Yeah.
There we go. See, calm your anxiety, my friend. Actually, in that context, this is not my week in geek. We'll get to that in a second. But I did finally watch the movie Us, or if we're a character from recent seasons of Doctor Who, Oz. And guess what? It's good.
Well, there you go. Elevated horror.
Yep. And he's got a new movie coming out called Nope. That looks like it's about aliens, which is, you know what? Jordan Peele gets a free pass as far as I'm concerned. Like, Dude, he's so good. Yeah, so I'm glad that, like, having, apparently you missed most of, like, the Scream chronology, that you can come back to it, and apparently the most recent installment, and find that it's still holding true to its aesthetic and sort of thematic origins, which is cool. That's good, and doing so in a way that's actually relevant, which is even better.
Yeah, you know, and as I said, it wasn't a great film, but it was definitely. I enjoyed it, and if it's the kind of thing where, you know, I'd say if you watch like the first one, and thought like, oh, I could. This is, you know, this could be, you know, like if you watch the first one, thought like it was interesting, or you enjoyed it. I think this one is just on the same kind of level. You know, it doesn't have Jerry O'Connell, but
or
I think he was in the second.
Who
one.
else was it? Was Matthew Lillard in that?
Matthew Lillard was in the first one. Skeet Ulrich.
Nev Campbell?
So, no. Is that her name? She's in it, I believe, right? Is it Nev Campbell? Yeah, David Arquette, Nev Campbell, and Courtney Cox were actually all in this one.
Oh, Courtney Cox, that's right as well. Yeah. And we won't make you spoil who shows up again. Oh, I guess that's the last question.
I just said the three of them, right?
Oh, okay, those three. You said it was released in January of this year, which means it was filmed during pandemic times.
Yes. Yeah.
Any evidence of that or to that? Any conspicuous FaceTime calls or?
No, there wasn't really. No, I don't think there. It wasn't like when I was watching the show MacGyver, and suddenly like every city street that they're on is mysteriously vacant. You know,
right?
There was. I would say it was done in a way, and it may have been because it was filmed in. Well, it's late 2020, so that was still would have been like pandemic time. So I don't know, but it worked out. Nothing about it said like, oh look, there's just missing people everywhere. You know. They may have just chosen sets and locations. You know, I would say probably the one thing is that there's several scenes in a hospital that have suspiciously few people just for a hospital generally, you know? Like, you see lots of, like, nurses and stuff like, no, there's like only, like, one or two.
Right. Like, oh, this must be a good day.
Yeah. But anyway, that was my Week in Geek, Dan. What about you?
I have been doing a bunch of things, but I think I'm going to focus on a video game that I've been playing. Which is actually relevant and perhaps disturbing, so I guess trigger warning for pandemics. I've been playing an indie game from a studio called Asobo Studios, which I believe is a French studio. Let me double check that real quick. Yeah, it's a French studio, and a game they made that takes place. Let me tell you if this is your. I want you to tell me if this is your jam. This is set in 14th century France.
Oh.
During the time of, in this case, the French Inquisition and the Black Plague, and it's a game called A Plague Tale: Innocence. And being an indie game, I think there are a lot of it drops a lot of sort of suppositions on the player, at least on the astute player. Like, okay, I expect it to be pretty simple, pretty bare bones in a lot of ways, because it's not operating on a huge AAA budget. And maybe even short, I guess. From what I've played so far, I haven't finished the game. It is not short. It is not simple. It is not sacrificing quality on any level. It is I should say it's a beautiful game. It's clear that they've done a lot of research and put a lot of assets into recreating, as to the best of their ability, 14th century Aquitaine, France. And the gameplay is developed enough to set itself apart from a lot of indie games and AAA games. But actually, it definitely sets itself apart from AAA games, you know, the big budget studio games. As far as I know so far, and I could be proven wrong on this, the thing that really impresses me the most is that for being a game that takes place during 14th century France, during the Black Plague, so far, it's playing it straight. Like, there's no supernatural elements at all. It's basically about... Well, the basic premise is you're playing a character named Amicia, this 14-year-old or 15-year-old girl who is the daughter of nobility in France, who at this time the nobility falls due to the French Inquisition coming in and ruining everything. She has a brother named Hugo, who is much younger, who is presented as being sort of terminally ill in some shape or form. He's chronically ill, I guess is the right word actually for it. But in order to keep him from being taken captive by the ravenous Catholics, you go in and rescue him, and and that's where the game starts. It's kind of like this cross between Ico, the old game from PlayStation 2, and well, it's kind of like an iteration of that, I should say, where it's not a game about combat, it's not a game about fighting, it's a puzzle game where you always have this 10-year-old boy at your side. And you're presented with scenarios where you have to get through it without hurting yourself or him. The thing is that the obstacle you're always trying to get across, and this is kind of the flex from the developers, is that you're always trying to get through basically oceans of plague rats, and like they are oceans of plague rats. I don't know how my PlayStation 4 is not melting with how many rats they have on screen. They're doing some crazy math that is amazing to see. And to the point where the reveal of the rats being the main mechanic, which I'd been aware of before I started playing it, but like I'm playing through maybe the first 45 minutes to an hour of it. I'm like, I thought this was a game where like you gotta like wade through rats, but the first part of the game is you getting out of like the castle you're raised in and getting your brother to safety. You leave the confines of nobility, and you're running literally through the alleyways of the surrounding town, which has X's painted on doors, and you realize, oh shit, there's a plague going on. And you finally come upon a church, and you meet a friar, and he's like, oh yeah, we know who you're looking for. You got to go through the underground to get there, though. But that's not really safe. And basically as soon as you say that, and again, it's just boggling to me how they make this, and it's not through a cinematic scene or anything like that. It's just hundreds, thousands of rats come bursting out of the walls and set up the basic mechanic of the game. So there, I can easily explain how the mechanic works, because all of a sudden it becomes really transparent. It's kind of like a fog. The rats are a fog of war mechanic, where if you go too far into the fog, you instantly die. And so the mechanic of the game is making sure you have a source of light with you, whether it's a torch, whether it's lighting a bonfire, that drives the rats away. So it's ultimately a puzzle game. And you're presented with different scenarios throughout the chapters of the game to get from point A to point B without letting the rats get you, but basically you're carving a path through these rats that are all animated. They're all just crawling over each other and scurrying away. Like, it's insane. It's a wonderful feat of technology, but basically, yeah, you're just kind of like, you're Moses parting the seas. And
of rats.
With rats.
The rat sea.
The rat sea. Isn't that a programming language? You have a bunch of tools at your disposal. You do have a slingshot, and you can collect different objects to sling. You have.
I was like what?
Is that the right verb? I'm not sure. But like a rocks, you can throw rocks to knock down pauldrons to light them on fire and stuff like that. You can throw rocks to distract guards who are impeding your path. You can alert guards and have them come towards you. Basically they're saying, "What was that noise?" And they're holding torches to get through the rats. And then what you do is you throw a rock at the torch, which extinguishes the torch, and those guards become devoured. And then you also get upgrades. You can also eventually throw stuff that ignites extinguished like campfires and stuff like that, which opens up paths for you. You can pick up pots to throw to distract guards. Very Metal Gear in that kind of way. You don't have to eat snakes, though, but with rats. But the thing is, like, it's a very deliberate game, and very, very carefully rendered. It's a very beautiful game, despite its grotesqueness. I think I might have talked about grotesqueness when I last talked about Batman Arkham Knight, the third, or actually technically the fourth Arkham game, where it's like they're reveling in kind of how beautifully gross they can make it. But it's all bolstered by the fact and lifted by this wonderful acting they have, the Amicia and her brother Hugo, the way they've animated these characters, the way they interact with each other. Because you play as Amicia, the owner of the slingshot, and like I said, kind of like with the game Ico, you're always pulling your brother along with you. But you can command him to stay while you go clear a path and then call him towards you. You can, if you can't get to an area where you need an item, you can tell him to go into that area and get it as long as it's safe. And you also pick up companions along the way. But it's a game that I think is a really good illustration of independent games dipping their toes in the pool of AAA games, which is something I think that's something that really interests me, which is that this game looks as good as any big budget, big studio, corporate owned game. But the mechanic is so focused that I think ultimately, with its limited systems and its focused gameplay, to me, I think it might be a more rewarding experience than playing a AAA game that makes me play for 80 hours and has 5 different systems in it. You know, I'm hearing a lot about Elden Ring. I'm hearing a lot about Horizon not Forbidden West. That was the original one. No, Forbidden West is the new game, where like there's crafting mechanics and there's combat mechanics and there's building mechanics. I'm like, that's great and all, but that just also feels like it's kind of filling space. This is a game where it's like you have a tool set, and every scenario you go into, you know what the tool set is, assuming that they might add 1 or 2 more things onto it over the course of the rest of the game. But I feel like it's a game that's laid out in chapters. I think I'm 7 chapters in out of 14. I feel like I have the basics and the majority of what I'm going to have for the rest of the game at this point. And so it becomes more of a logic puzzle that to me, in a sense, is more engaging than a lot of the big budget AAA games have you engage with. There's no hand holding. Well, sorry, there's literal hand holding going on in this game because
you're holding Hugo's hand.
Yeah. But like, it's mostly in the spectacle of the scenarios they've set up for each sort of engagement or each sort of level, where you're breaking out of the castle in one scene. You're literally outrunning mobs of angry people because they're starving. And they feel betrayed by the monarchy, and you represent that, and they're dying of the plague, and they see you as the remaining blame for that. And like, you're not attacking them as much as you're just like, these are kids realizing that there are darker things going on outside the walls that they grew up in, and they can't do anything about it, but people are blaming them for the problems of it. Again, I'm not trying to make any commentary here, but like, it's an interesting perspective. And they get thrown into this world that those people that were chasing them were experiencing, to the point where I'm walking across a battlefield that's, again, as far as the eye can render, as far as my PlayStation can render, littered with bodies of soldiers who've massacred each other. And it's disgusting. And the animation is you carefully stepping through them because your 10-year-old brother is horrified by it. Mm-hmm. But you also have to contend with like, oh, the rats are over here. I need to light that lantern there so I can get there. But I also need to throw a rock at this chain to drop this bridge so that it can distract some of the rats out of the way as well. And there's an interesting environmental narrative going on in addition to the literal narrative that's going on and the emergent narrative. It's a wonderful sort of cross-pollination of all those things that we extol when there's, or we praise when in AAA games for 5 minutes you get some emergent narrative. But this is all those things kind of coming together for a short, compact, and focused gaming experience that, even though I'm only probably halfway through the game, I'm like, this is... It has my attention more than anything else that's out right now. And it's cool. It's cool despite being super depressing because it's a plague, which
right. Well,
I have no relation to at all.
Well, no, I mean, because the pandemic's over. It's okay.
Masks off.
I mean, we've taken our masks off for this recording.
Oh, you have?
Oh, does that reveal that we, in fact, are not in the same room?
Oh, no. Oh, no. Andrew, this whole time has been in Seattle.
This whole time. Who'd have guessed?
Right.
Yeah,
the
no,
Sacramento podcast.
Best Sacramento podcast, 50% Seattle. No, that's, it's always a weird thing. I mean, one of the things is my experience in learning about how systems like Unity and stuff, how like going through a little tutorial, and it was like within 6 hours I had something that was like, oh man, this probably took someone years in the 90s, right? Like, I have this little space shooter and it's functional. Yeah. So that's, I think, one of the things that just the technology has changed such that you can have small groups of people make things that look really good. As long as they have the right skills necessary. So like that's why when you say it's a small a small indie team. Well, actually, I don't know. I wonder how many people they actually are. But
that's a good
it's
question.
like, well, they should have a few people who are really good at rendering. Doing the graphics for rat swarms.
Yeah, apparently up to 5,000 rats can be on screen with the technology that they've developed. In 2002, it was a 12-person studio.
Okay, so it's not the smallest, but it's also not. It's not huge.
It's not huge. It's not Activision, right? Who actually published this game? Focus Home Interactive is the publisher. Yeah.
It is always neat to be able to see that.
Another French publisher, but yeah.
And and also I especially with some of the big companies kind of getting more and more, for me, like, frustrating is not quite the word, but like
homogenous.
Yeah, well, it's just more that like I'm kind of like, oh yay, another. What was it they said that Activision wasn't going to release a Call of Duty this year? The first time in like a decade.
You're right.
And I'm like, wow, have they been releasing a Call of Duty every year? Holy crap!
Yeah.
So
and
like,
wasn't that the game that came out this year was bad? It's just like it was finally that bad. Right?
It's like someone finally was like, okay, we're tired of this.
Which is funny because they had like 3 studios, I think, or maybe 2 at the very least, bouncing back and forth between release years. That's how they kept that momentum going. I think for me, the thing that really stands out about this game, that I think a lot of gamers, especially those that maybe pay attention to the news and maybe have some history with video gaming, we kind of think of video games as being there's US games and there's Japanese games. And here's a French studio just doing this weird ass historical drama that has AAA graphics, for lack of a better word, and got some traction on the critical side of things. Again, no one's saying it's the best game ever, but it's getting people to pay attention to this studio out of a country that we don't think of as being a game developer, right? And that, I think, on its own is cool to have the studio, whether it's small or not, whether it's indie or not. At least they're coming out of a part of the world that is not really recognized for making games. Now, Ubisoft, of course, breaks everything in this regard, but Ubisoft, I think, is just viewed as a European conglomerate. I think Ubisoft is NATO. Is that right? I'm not sure. But joking, of course.
Although, I mean, you act like this is the first French game, and I would like to point out, even in indie sides, Dead Cells
Yeah,
from
no, I
Ocean's
think
Wind.
that's the best part. I mean, going back to something, a refrain we sing a lot on this show is that like, it's the indie realm where we're getting a lot of new voices, right, or commonly unheard voices, and we don't hear necessarily like a French studio being published and heavily marketed by Activision or Sony or Microsoft, right? Aside from Ubisoft developed games, but even those are just like amalgams of all of Europe at this point. I don't know, it's just kind of cool. It's kind of cool, and seeing them put the effort in to do an English translation and not have it be bad, and the acting is good. Like it's you know, it's cool to see a small team put in a lot of effort to be as seamlessly integrated into the gaming, the ongoing narrative of gaming, and you know, it's not calling attention to itself, aside from the fact that it's an interesting, beautiful, and good game. Like the story isn't the fact that it's a French studio, like they're just making good games, which is like is a good goal for a lot of studios. But obviously, there are studios out of parts of the world where we should be maybe shining a brighter spotlight.
Actually, it's funny because the more I think about it, the more like France is actually not a good example, because I was like, oh, actually, because Ubisoft, which I don't, are they actually?
Yes,
are they French based?
I think I said that.
Thinking
yes.
Well, I wasn't sure if they were. No, I was thinking of Atari, which was actually just the name of Infogrames Entertainment, which was a French company. So I realized like there's actually some major names in video games that are.
But
all
no one
French
thinks of France as a video game,
which is funny. I know, right? Like
right?
I realized like some of the biggest companies in the industry are based in France, and yeah.
Or they've been absorbed by other parts of the world at this point. Like Atari is ostensibly an American company at this point.
No. The point is it's ostensibly French. That's because it was bought by the name Atari was bought by the French. That's the joke.
Right.
Because it was originally Infogrames, who I knew from their classic '90s game Alone in the Dark. But they anyway. I just because I had to look them up.
Do they still own Atari? I doubt that.
Atari Windows. There's some. Yeah, the company's now Atari. It's they choose that as their name because I think they had problems with their French names because people are like, what is this? So they just adopted the American name when they bought Atari. But it's just funny because when I look at it, they were through some bankruptcy and stuff, and I think they're not even interesting, although they're still around. But anyway, I digress.
Making speaker hats. I know that much.
It just the funny idea that the more I pick at it, like actually maybe the French were much more involved in video games than I normally even give them credit for, right?
Maybe the French should get involved in tabletop board games.
Oh wait, they already do that too.
What? That's impossible. Maybe they should try their hand at comics and graphic. They are fucking bandes dessinées. They even have a name for it that's adopted by the rest of Europe. Anyway. Power to the French. Freedom fries. Anyway, it's a good game. I like it. But it's a mood also with because it was originally released in 2019, which was briefly before the world died. So it's a game about a plague, which is interesting to play. I don't want to say post-plague, but definitely mid-plague. Where I do feel like if I tried to play this 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year and a half ago, I don't think it would be anywhere in my wheelhouse. But for some reason, I feel like I have enough numbness to it that I can appreciate it for what it is and find what's the Latin term, dulce et utile. I can find it to be sweet and useful. And maybe I'm just part of why I bring it up is that there's a catharsis to it that I'm finding, though I realize that not everybody will find catharsis in a game like this. But we all have something that we turn to get through what we're dealing with as we hopefully move on to the next phase, which is hopefully not, though, a worse phase than before with this thing called COVID-19. But, A Plague Tale. Innocence by Asobo Studio. It's beautiful. It's heart-wrenching. It's very well done, but it's also about a plague. and it's by apparently the biggest gaming conglomerate on the planet, France. Who knew? Did you know that France bought Japan?
What? I mean, the one thing is, whenever we talk about video games, and the more you pick at some of that, and you're like, actually, this is all over the place, right?
Yeah, right.
I think for me, it was when I realized that Sega was founded by an American.
Yep. Yeah, it
and
was.
That's,
yeah.
Even though I always thought it was a canonically Japanese company.
Well, it is a Japanese company, but it just happened to be founded by an American, yeah.
Right. But there's something about that, took the wind out of the sails for me, because that, and then you see other stories of these companies where it's like, oh, this is actually, whatever, this is British.
Right.
And then, of course, they all get bought and collectivized. And
Indeed. So, gaming's a mess. It always has been, always will be. That's the point. Avoid rats. So, if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on other social media, such as Twitter. You can find us at our respective handles. You can find Andrew on Twitter at ProfoundDark, tweeting about tabletop role-playing games and perhaps Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And what did I see the tweet about today? You were talking about Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yes, when different races or species were introduced or were accepted into the Academy. Well done. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick and me and my work at Bethel Comics.
While you're at our website, you can take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by going to the link in the corner that says YouTube. And there you'll actually find this podcast.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae. The other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod, the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use, whether it's something like the Apple Podcast app, or if you're still on that train, Spotify, or, of course, YouTube.
Right. Something about algorithm.
Oh, yeah. What would help us out? Thank you. What would help us out even more would be to go to their storefront and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. The Batman. We still haven't seen it.
We still haven't. And
It's long. It's so long.
It's not called the short Halloween, okay?
No, I think the long Halloween is still shorter than this movie.
Don't be wrong, people are enjoying it, but I look at a 3-hour movie about the Batman.
I need 2 days to watch that. I'm sorry.
You know what? I still haven't seen the Spider-Man.
That has nothing to do with the Batman. I hate to inform you.
They're both men. Actually, one is a high school kid.
Yeah, you might want to back off on that, but that could get you in a lot of trouble. So until you avoid some legal trouble, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. The one that's plugged into my TV, that shit, it takes off, right? It's like, like we're flying, it's Indiana Jones and we're flying to China, right?
Right? In fact, you found a Nazi just to put his head in the fan.
This machine kills Nazis.
Oh, yeah. What would help us out? Thank you. What would help us out even more would be to go to the storefront and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will spelp. What would help us out even more would be Jesus. What would help us out even more would be to go to this. Jesus will always help us out even more. Kind of like when you and I rented Man in Iron Mask to make fun of it. And then we went home and watched it. We're like, oh, fuck, this is actually all right. Oh, my God. I guess I'll have to buy a Mac Studio now. I don't believe in God, but I'm like, hey, I'd really love something between a Mac Pro and a Mac Mini. And it's like, you know what?
It's like, what if a Mac Mini, but twice as tall? So I did it, by the way. I don't know if I ever told you my old game of trying to make the most expensive thing on the order now screen. Mm-hmm. I got the Mac Studio to like $8,800, and you're like, what's in there?
Just get a Mac Pro, dude. God damn. Well, you should go to the Mac Pro and see what the biggest. Well, they have like options there for basically like, hey, are you Pixar?
Right. Well, it's like, you want a rack mounted one?
Here's a 16 core unit. I'm like, why?
Whoa. Click all the buttons.
Are you doing it? It's going up.
Oh, we're going up like the national debt here. Woo!
I need a loan. My bank.
I don't know what an Apple Afterburner card is, but $2,000.
You need it.
There's a button. Do I need an Apple Afterburner? I don't know what the fuck
Yes, you do.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. Absolutely. Why not?
Give me some
We're
software.
living in metaphor.
Only $54,947.98.
I just bought a house.
Jeez.
Did you know that James Gunn wrote the first 2 live-action Scooby-Doo movies?
No, but I could believe that.